All right, guys, thought I'd do a quick update here before I get started for the weekend. I kind of wrote out a list last night. So instead of using my dry erase board there, I just wanted some finer notes so I can tweak and adjust things as needed. But so it's what, March 29th today. I have an event that I'd really like to get this car to on April 12th and not have to rely on a backup plan for that, for like a little driving event. So everything that what I have on my list here for this weekend is all stuff that I can do on the car. I don't know if I'll have it running this weekend because I want to redo some wiring and move that around. But I want to get all the mechanical stuff done on this car. Get coolant in it, get power steering fluid in it, get the differential up in place, get all the axles in, get the brakes in, tighten up all the fittings, put brake fluid in here, maybe see if I can get around to bleeding the brakes. But just for those that maybe are new to the channel or wondering what my plan is with this car, originally it was going to be a really good handling street car, but I've really gone bonkers with it. Through the floor subframe connectors, roll cage, just a whole gambit of stuff, running the IRS on there. But Coyote swap, T56 6-speed, but it's kind of turned into, I'm almost calling it a race car with some street car creature comforts. I'm keeping heat and AC, although I'm probably not going to run that for this summer just because I want to get this car together unless I start pulling it back apart again and doing stuff over the summer with it. But that's my plan for right now, is see how close I can get or get this thing sitting on all four wheels. I got the fourth wheel that was damaged during shipping that's on its way. So excited about that. Then I'll get tires mounted up. I'll show you guys all that once that's all done in here. But I just want to get this car sitting on the ground and maybe be able to turn the key and fire it up this weekend. But I want to get it as close as I can, maybe like I said, minus like some electrical wiring, to being able to turn the key, start it up, and have it roll on its own, under its own power. So yeah, so let's see how far we can go. But maybe I'll just kind of show you where I'm sitting at right now. I got all of my fuel line up in place, and I did go through and drill all these out. I took all my little sheet metal screws out, and I wish I would have bought my little pneumatic riveting gun sooner. But I ended up just popping these in place. I was going to use some of the Evil Energy, like little clamps, spacers things, but then they're loose on these fuel lines that I have. So I just bit the bullet and mounted those all up here. I got all my brake lines in place, but I do have to put some more clips on that rear. I got to get the proportioning valve all mounted up in place. I think I'm just going to weld some nuts inside the car and then run bolts in from the outside there. So it's probably dark under here, but I do have this kind of mounted up in place. I got some nuts on the inside, so I'm just going to weld those in place, and then I figure I'll just run the bolts in from the outside instead of, I don't think there's enough room to have the bolts running out and acting like studs to mount them on here and still be able to get that proportioning valve up in there. It'll hit the floor. But I'll get that done, get those brake lines in place, get that in place. I really need to figure out where I'm gonna run this negative cable up to the engine block, get all that mounted. Then the one thing I am concerned about here too is if I have room for this. This is a positive cable. I did put red on it, but I didn't want to order another 25 feet of cable just so that I could use 2 feet of red. So got that marked appropriately, at least for my understanding, so that I can keep track of things. The plan for now is start getting this thing buttoned up. I'm not doing the sway bar end links until I have this thing sitting on its own weight on the ground. All right, gonna get started. I'm working on getting things cleaned up under here. So I was showing I'm getting all the brake lines kind of up in place, and I decided I'm not going to paint or prime or anything the bottom side of this car, because I want to get this thing on the road this summer. And priming the bottom of this car isn't a need to get this car on the road this spring. So I thought I'd pull this out of here. I got some stuff from when I did the subframe connectors where I ground some stuff smooth, so I have some bare steel there. Some spots where I've done some welding. Then back here I got a little bit of steel showing where this was like some undercoating kind of paint. So that's chipped off. But I just kind of want to get this cleaned up, and I'm kind of glad I pulled this out of here now, because I think I'm gonna kind of redo the mounting of the fuel filter and kind of move that up, because it kind of is really, well, it's in really close proximity to that back upper tube on the subframe right there. But I want to see if I can get that moved up a little bit. I got the fuel tank all up in place here. Then I noticed too, when I pulled the brake lines out, I think I need to do a DIN kind of flare instead of a double flare to get it to seal up against those brake hoses that go there. So I'm gonna pull those out of there again. Hopefully I don't have to redo those brake lines, but it's just so close. I'm gonna have to straighten this out a little bit here to get it into my flaring tool, I'm afraid. So I may just end up redoing these two brake lines going up to each side. So hopefully that's not a major fiasco. And then while I have this out of here, I'm gonna look and see if I can get some grommets to go up in those upper control arm mounts for mounting those brake lines. And then get everything kind of securely mounted for these fuel lines and everything like that. While I have this out of here, it'll be a lot easier to get to some of that stuff. But I was going to show you too with this one brake line. If you remember from a previous post or previous video, on the driver's side, this brake line went up and ahead of the rear shock, or towards the outside of the rear shock, so towards the outside of the body. And then this one, it had a weird, it wasn't bent as much, so it went around to the inside of the shock, and it just seemed like it would be kind of a rubbing point. So I thought, well, if worse comes to worse, I'll try to get this bent. And then if I ended up breaking something, I figure I'll just buy some new hoses, because I actually got these secondhand, but they look like they're in good shape yet. But luckily I was able to bend this a little bit. I took a little extension, kind of stuck it in place here so I could kind of get that bent around, but it looks like it turned out pretty well. So I think I'm in good shape there, and it's really close to the same bend now. So just wanted to show my progress here. So I got the Maximum Motorsports tie rods in this IRS now, replacing the little meager. These were the tie rods that were in it. So plenty beefy, I'm sure, a solid steel rod. But as you can see here, that's a pretty beefy bar in there now. And I got the sway bar bolted back in. I put in some polyurethane bushings for the sway bar, but I didn't put the end links in yet, figuring that I'd probably have to drop some stuff, get some stuff out of the way when I go to put the axle shafts back in. So I'm just gonna hold off on that for the time being. Should have pretty easy access to them since I don't have coil springs in there anymore. Got the coilovers, so. But just thought I'd show this. But that's basically how I get it up underneath the car. So I'm not putting the differential axle shafts and all that stuff in there, just to kind of keep things a little bit lighter, so I'm not tipping it off of the jack so easy. But I figure once I have this up in the car, it should be pretty easy to get the differential up in there and then get the axle shafts and everything in. Feeling really good about this. Got all this up in here. Got the subframe bolts tightened for the IRS subframe. I torqued the upper control arm bolts before I threw it in here. These lower ones, according to Maximum Motorsport, should be 184 foot-pounds of torque. So I wanted to do that when the subframe was mounted in the car. I just did that, so those are tight. So next thing, I got the differential there. I was debating if I should put on my aftermarket cover that I have for it, or if I'll just, kind of thinking I'll just leave this differential cover on now, because I'm probably going to pull that back out of there and switch to 373 or 410 gears in there. It's the stock 355s in there right now. So just for the sake of getting this car running, I think I'll probably just leave that on there so I don't make a big old mess. So I just wanted to record my starting point for the day. So it's Sunday, March 30th. And no differential in there yet. I was messing around with that a little bit last night, and I thought I'd try to get my clutch cable figured out too. So I actually pulled that out of here. I thought, well, originally the bracket bolts up to this frame rail, and I did some looking, and there's a couple of bosses right here on the cylinder head. That would be good. So I actually pulled the clutch cable off. Got the differential here, got the clutch cable off. So I cut the end of this bracket off, kind of straightened it out, kind of put a couple of other little bends in it, drilled a hole in it, and got a bolt. So hopefully I can get that clutch cable in there, and I won't have to drop the engine out of here to put a nutsert or something in the frame rail. But I thought I'd show that for now. Next job is getting that differential in there. Then I got all my shims, the bushings. This is the new rear one. So gonna get that in the car and let's see how far I can get. Okay, I just realized something now. It's gonna be kind of a pain in the butt. Okay, so this bracket goes on and holds up the front side of the differential, but probably kind of dark under here, but it mounts to the back side of this bolt that goes through the control arm, and I have that guy torqued already, and that was a pain in the butt, but it's what I got to do. So that bolt is coming off, and I'll back it out a little bit so I can get this up in there when I get the differential up. Yay. Alright, I thought you guys would get a kick out of this. So it's a good day to be in here, right, Barney? And it's March 30th, spring in Minnesota. And this is what we're dealing with right now. Welcome to spring in Minnesota. So this was a pain in the butt getting this differential up in place. So first you had to put in this, see if I can get a good shot of it. I had to put in this bushing. There's a bolt that goes through from this other side here. So then you have to get that tie rod up out of the way. Then put that bolt in, but leave it loose. Then you jack this differential up into place. And these two bolts here, you have to start into this bushing. But I started to turn this one in, and it didn't seem like it was turning quite right. So then what I ended up doing was pulling that bolt that comes straight through this bracket here, pulled that bolt back out of there, so this was just hanging freely. I thought about putting this on the differential before I put it up in place, but there's just not enough room to kind of jockey this in place very easily. So that actually worked pretty decent, and I got the top bolt started and ran it in a little ways, and then I ran this bottom one in. I think I kind of screwed up the first, just the little bit of a thread starting into there. So I got the top one going in there, and then I was able to do the bottom one and felt more comfortable about that. It just, the first initial turn was a little tough, and then it went in pretty nice and smooth. So I got these both in there, and you're supposed to torque them to like 76 pound-feet, but you can't get a torque wrench up in here, so I used my calibrated torque elbow and got those torqued. This bolt here that holds this up into this bracket here is still, it's in there and it's almost tight but not. So then I can start putting this front cross member in here again. That's laying behind me over here. So I got to get that dude back up in place underneath the differential. Then I can get the jack out of the way, I think. Okay, so I got the differential up in the car. I just remembered I still got to torque these bolts back down for the control arms. But I followed all the instructions from Maximum Motorsports. These are like some little spherical concave and convex bushings, right, that sandwich each side of the forward differential mounts here. The back is torqued down for that aluminum bushing that's way on the back there. But yeah, I went and got one of these nice magnetic angle finders. So I got the angle of this matched up to the angle on the damper on the engine. So both of them are about 2.5 degrees up the way the car is sitting right now. So I think I'm set to go there. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And that was just a nice cheap tool just from my local hardware store. So it was like 15 bucks. So pretty cheap tool. So I'm hoping everything is all set under here. I'll go grab my torque wrench and wrestle these control arm bolts again. These bolts are all torqued down. So I ended up putting a bunch of aluminum spacers and steel shims at the bottom there. And looks like I got a steel shim at the top too, so I think I'm all set there. So there's a whole stack of shims and spacers there. So I'm going to get that control arm torqued down and then start working on getting the axle shafts back in, getting the brakes on, all that good stuff. Okay, last update for the weekend. So I got pretty much this whole rear end together. Differentials in, half shafts are in, brakes are in, brake pads, all the braided brake line is in, and everything's tightened up to what I think it should be tightened up to. The coilovers are in, and got those kind of squared away. Ignore the crappy wiring, that's going to get cleaned up eventually. All the subframe bolts are tight. The only thing I really need to address is I need to change the pinion seal on the differential. And once I have this guy on the ground, or have brakes working so I can set the parking brake, I'll double check this nut here. I torqued it down as much as I could with my little DeWalt electric impact wrench. Brake cable and parking brake is all mounted back up in place. I do need to get little grommets popped back in place there. But as you can see, got both sides. Sway bar end links are in, and I'll have to adjust those once it's on the ground and tighten those up. Or put it on ramps or whatever and set it on its own weight. Make sure the diff's topped off with fluid. And then once I have all the brakes in, I'll be able to bleed the brakes. I do want to get this set on the ground so I can put the front end links in too. But yeah, that whole rear end, like I said, minus the pinion seal and topping off the diff fluid, is pretty much ready to rip. But that's where I'm calling it for the weekend. So I had a whole list to do of like getting everything together, getting the clutch cables done, getting the front brakes all into place. So I did get some rubber fuel hose and put it on edges so it's not rubbing through and causing shorts. So I did that on both sides here. But all the brake lines, minus these fittings on the end here, and to the big old Brembo calipers, pretty much all that stuff is tightened up except for those bits. That was my weekend. Pretty much 2 full days to get that IRS back up in place and kind of get everything, most everything buttoned up on that.